Hi, welcome. I'm Russell Sturgis. I'm the founder and principal of EAP Mentor. Welcome to the new blog series for 2018. And this week I've decided to do a blog on the idea of having a purpose. It's something that has come up in discussions with people over the last few months, and I thought that it was worthwhile exploring the different notions of purpose in order to give a perspective of what that means from the EAP context. Purpose ultimately for most of us is determined or inspired by family or cultural programming, and so oftentimes we will see purpose being oriented towards what it is that society sees as being important and valuable, or what it is that your family sees as being important and valuable. And of course, ultimately, from my perspective, what we see as being important and valuable is broken down into essentially two different components. One is things that are important and valuable to you as an individual. So this might incorporate things like being loved or being accepted, and so you develop a purpose that's about driving you for acceptance. It's what motivates you. It's what has you turn up in the world. It could also be having self-determination or to be self-empowered, the right to determine for yourself what it is that you want. And so you have a particularly strong focus on establishing that right for self-empowerment and self-choice. It might be about materialism, so in other words, owning a home, or the freedom of owning a home, or driving a certain car, or looking a certain way. So what happens is there's a high investment in terms of purpose around material values. Now, on the flip side, of course, you may have been exposed in a family environment where the values were more associated with how you relate to other people, in terms of it being about service, or it being more about caring for others. And so you may have been raised in a household where helping the needy was an important part. So you see that as a priority, and you're aware of that, and you live your life out with that purpose of being able to make a difference through helping the needy. It might also be that you are a giver of love as opposed to somebody who's looking for it, and so you spend a lot of your time being able to identify ways in which you can be nurturing to other people, which it may be your role then to turn up in caring for aged parents, and other siblings may not have that same focus, or it could be about caring for the environment, for example, and having an interest in helping with the environment. It may be that you've been raised with the purpose of being a peacemaker, and the fact that you can make a contribution to bringing peace into the world, and so therefore you adopt a set of behaviours and beliefs that are about supporting that, and that becomes the driver for how you turn up in the world. So what I'm alluding to is the fact that we can be programmed about what purpose is, and that it can be either on a very self-centered perspective, or one which is exocentric in terms of its ability to look out for those around you and for the planet. Many times we each possess a narrative that also can impact purpose, and so in EAP we talk about the story, which is the narrative that we've established certainly by the time we're 7 years old, which is a core belief coming from a core fear that we hold about ourselves. And it's this idea that we have an underpinning belief generally of some form of scarcity, not enough love, not enough, that I don't have enough worth, whatever it is. And so we establish our purpose about survival and being able to get through life surviving, as opposed to going through life with a sense of enjoying and living it abundantly. There's a point where we have the ability to decide that we want to select a purpose consciously. So in other words, it's no longer an unconscious program, but it's something that we decide that we really want to choose for ourselves. And of course, these become the things that inspire our goals and what it is that we push forward to and what it is that we want to do. So it could be it could be intelligentsia, for example. It could be about becoming more academically astute, or emotionally. It could be about being emotionally expressed. So it could be creative arts, for example, where you develop a passion and from that a real sense of purpose. It could be around the body in terms of health and well-being, and of course sometimes sickness drives us to having that becoming our passion. It could be about what we in society would refer to as spiritual values. So in other words, we are wanting to develop ourselves emotionally and psychologically, and in the context of that spiritually, so that we have this greater sense of relationship with the divine or God. So these become things that we end up choosing for ourselves as purpose. In EAP, what we suggest happens in terms of purpose is the whole notion, and this is what I write about in this week's blog, is the whole notion that when we come to the place of practicing mindfulness. Now, in our context, if you have seen my blogs from last year, we define mindfulness as remembering that you have a choice. And in fact, if I want to fine-tune that, it's remembering that you have a more self-loving choice than the one which is the programmed one that you've been experiencing you're suffering from. And so mindfulness is coming to that point where you recognize that there's a choice. And there's a point in that continual commitment to mindfulness where you align with the more self-loving reality. So there's a point where just through the path of what we call least resistance, through just the fact that you've created a new neural program through being mindful, you all of a sudden start to make more self-loving choices in terms of the food you eat, or the work that you do, or the hours you spend at work, or whatever it is. You actually strike a balance where what it is that you contribute is balanced against what it is that you are giving to yourself. Of course, as you become more self-loving, what happens is you develop a greater sense of awareness of being more loving to people around you, and so you become much more compassionate in terms of how you turn up in the world. Now, we were talking about the narrative before, and what we explore in the Enhancers Awareness program is from that narrative a whole lot of gifts or abilities that you've developed in order to have those the fear overcome or the needs met that was in that narrative. And so what we see is that those gifts and those abilities, so for example in my case, out of my story around needing to be noticed, I developed the ability to develop training programs and public speak, and I became an accomplished healer. So I developed a whole lot of abilities in order to have that need to be noticed fulfilled. So what I've been able to do is to take those gifts, and now I get to use them in order to fulfill my purpose. And that purpose, as I talk about in the blog, isn't so much one that I choose for myself, although it becomes self-evident many times from the actual gifts that have come out of your story. But it's more to the fact that you get this sense of a calling, you in this place of becoming more still, which is the consequence of being mindful. As you become more still, you get to hear intuition, but more than intuition, what you get to hear is what I call the still small voice, which is this higher inspiration, and it's in this place of experiencing the still small voice that you hear the calling of what it is that you're to contribute. It's like you become aware of the role that you're to fulfill, which isn't something that you've selected for yourself, but it's something that is extended to you as an opportunity. And of course, what I observed and recognized was that the skills and abilities that came out of the narrative and the story were in fact the tools that you're able to use then to fulfill your purpose. So I'd like you to consider the idea that maybe there's another whole way of being able to approach this concept of a life purpose, and that maybe your contribution to finding out what that is your commitment to living life mindfully, and therefore extending that to being more compassionate, and from that place of being more compassionate to being more benevolent, or in other words, to be more kind. And it's in that state of compassion and kindness that you'll find your opportunity to fulfill your purpose. Anyway, thank you for listening today. I hope that gives you just a little bit more added insight. Please go and have a read of the blog. And once again, if you have any insights or thoughts about the concept of purpose, or any questions you have about purpose, please go to the comments section that's associated with this blog and make an inquiry, or let us know what you're thinking. Anyway, thank you, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye.